Oh, okay.
And the
She has won several awards for her coverage of disability, legal issues, and open government. She's co-author of IRE's Mapping for Stories, a computer-assisted reporting guide. We are thrilled to have her with us during this exciting news week. Welcome, Jennifer!
Okay, so I think the Onion summed up this week really, really well. This expletive week, enough, okay? And I did want to find out where the students are in the room. Where are the students? Raise your hand. Yay! Have you all filed a public records request? Okay, all of you? Good, okay. There's many professional journalists that have not done that, and it always amazes me. So keep on the government. Thank you so much for inviting me here. It's an honor to be here. John sent me links to a lot of the finalists. You guys have done amazing work. Don't worry, I'm not going to announce the winners right now. But you know, keeping government accountable, reopening records, great investigations. It made me really happy to still be in this business. It's also really good to be in a part of the country where people don't freak out if you smile at them or say hi. Or
You live where now?
I do. I live in New York City now, and people just freak out if you say hi. Anyhow, and if anybody's tweeting out there, be kind. As soon as I open my mouth, I forget that Twitter exists, and I tend to spout off. So be kind if you are tweeting. So when Tracy asked me to do this, Tracy, where are you?
I'm here.
Okay, in the purple. I feel like I should have worn purple. She asked me to talk about the future of investigative reporting, particularly in the light of so many cutbacks. So I am not an expert. I am a lowly reporter.
You're an expert.
No heckles from the audience, please. Oh, Tracy assured me that later we would be doing line dancing on the dance floor, so led by her. So what I did is what we do. I did some reporting. I talked to people that I really admire to get their advice. Caveat, this is simply my opinion, not that of my employer. So I know it's been a long, dreary road. I was, at the morning news during lots of layoffs and buyouts, and I've seen lots of this around the country. The first newspaper I ever worked for, the San Jose Mercury News, announced this week that they're selling their building, and it will soon become nail salons and yogurt shops. So, it was a layup building, so I don't know why I'm going to miss it, but it's kind of sad. But I still don't think investigative reporting is dead. It can't be. Look at what happened this week. We need to give information so readers and viewers and family members can know what's going on. And well, things are a little crazy now. Slate had something today on just shut your phone off, shut off Twitter. Wait to the end of the day and then read some in-depth newspaper stories and you'll be way ahead of everyone else. But investigative reporting will play a big role in the aftermath to make sure that government agencies have done what they're supposed to do. That we get records about what's happened in West Texas and the Boston bombings. And perhaps we could just spend a little more time on getting the stories out to readers than bashing all the screw-ups by other media. So, some of the positive signs for the future of investigative reporting. In the last issue of Investigative Reporters and Editors, which is an association for investigative reporters and editors, former Star-Telegram projects editor Mark Horvath pointed out that market surveys have found that readers and viewers want investigative reporting. In one study, the two top priorities for readers and viewers was reporting that digs for facts and truth and holds the powerful accountable. More news organizations are realizing this. NBC has well, at least the NBC owned and operated stations are working to build investigative teams in their newsrooms. They have a 16-person investigative team in the Bay Area in California. Hearst is rebuilding some of their investigative teams. Several companies have company-wide training. But I take that as a good sign. At a couple of the conferences I've attended recently, the job boards have been completely full, particularly for people who can dig, who can look at records. So the students, if you guys can, dig for records, use data, you're going to be way, way, way ahead of everyone else. And I'll talk a little bit more about data later. And I'll do some training in the back after this. So to fill some of the gap, there have been nonprofit newsrooms sprouting up all over the country. There's several in Texas. ProPublica is a nonprofit newsroom based in New York City. And we do journalism, we do mostly national projects, but there's great local nonprofits that are kind of filling in the gap as well. And I want to talk about just one of those very, very small organizations. My former ProPublica colleague, Susan White, her husband said they could live in New York City for 3 years. On the day of the third year was up, her husband said, we're moving back to California. So when she got there, she went to work for a website that I'd never heard of called Inside Climate News. Yeah, I'd never heard of it either, but she scraped together enough money to buy one reporter a PC so they could do data analysis, and she sent her to a week of training. She had 4 reporters who lived all over the country, but their work resulted in a series of stories about the Keystone Pipeline and the Dilbit spill into the Kalamazoo River, which happened after the BP spill, so a lot of people didn't hear about it. In fact, they called it the spill that no one had ever heard of, but it was the most expensive pipeline spill in known history. After it was announced that those stories were awarded the Pulitzer for national reporting earlier this week, one of the little events from this week, her husband Bob said, this is a true David and Goliath story, except that David didn't even have a stone. So I asked her how they did it and what advice she would give others. She said, if you're determined and willing to work your butts off, you can still do this kind of work. We had big ideas that we felt was very important, and we just decided it had to be done. She said, if you don't have the resources, find a path to getting it done. And I remember she called me when she was trying to find a PC, like, what can I do for under $400? So that she could get these stories done. She said, when you start, you can't stop and think about all the hurdles and problems and all the reasons that this won't happen. She said, we worked under the assumption that whatever hurdles we ran into, we would overcome. We went along and asked questions, and when another came out, we figured out who could answer it. One of the very young reporters who worked on that project, a young woman, Lisa Song, took the time to understand the science and technology so we could say less. And I love this part, which Susan told me. She said, we knew enough to make simple sentences that were 100% accurate. All the while, they were working on other stories for their website, not exactly like a daily newspaper, but they still do turn stuff out. We never had a period where we could just work on the project. She said, feeding the beast is essential, but so was carving out enough time to do this project. In 2009, reporters from the East Valley Tribune in Mesa, Arizona had very limited time and resources, but showed that a local sheriff's focus on immigration and enforcement measures were endangering investigations of local violent crime and public safety. That year they won the Pulitzer for local reporting. And I talked to one of the reporters, Brian Gabrielson, who's now at the Center for Investigative Reporting last week, and he gave me some tips. He said, exploit your editor. He didn't actually say it that way, but get your editor invested, have them read some of the documents, make him part of the team so that they will understand how challenging it is and make it their story as well. He said also, never pitch a sweeping issue to investigate. Few editors respond positively to, let's do a 5-part series on toxic emissions. The days of the giant, multi-page, multi-double truck, 5-part series really don't exist anywhere now. We work on a lot of projects with the Washington Post, and they rarely do more than 2 days in an investigation anymore. But there's other ways to do these stories. Ryan is a great example of a reporter who really invested in himself. He was 25. He was making $36,000 a year. He spent several $100s to buy a piece of software so he could do some statistical analysis, and he went to a class that I taught. And he said what he developed made me a better journalist capable of measuring things on a macro level that elevated my stories. In 2010, Daniel Gilbert, a reporter for the Bristol Herald Courier in Virginia, won the Pulitzer for public service. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm missing a Betty story. For his stories about natural gas royalties owed to thousands of landowners in Virginia. To do that project, he convinced his editor to send him to a computer-assisted reporting boot camp and learn to use a database program, and plugged away at his data while working on his daily requirements. Mark Corbett told me that story, and he assured me that that is not a plug for IRE training, but that to remind everyone that the Investigative Reporters and Editors National Conference is in San Antonio this year. So, I realize I'm pointing out prize-winning stories, but we are at an awards banquet. But beyond prizes, we kind of need to remember, that these stories can make a huge difference in people's lives. These tell citizens about their government. When you guys go out and fight for records and reopen records, it keeps our governments accountable. For me personally, a story that probably is one of the most important to me personally is a series of stories I did in St. Louis, with a St. Louis guy over here years ago, that prompted a federal investigation of the transit system service for people with disabilities. We didn't win a bunch of awards. I don't even think the paper entered the stories in any contest, but blind people could ride buses because of our stories, and disabled people could get on buses because of our stories. So the form and format of journalism is changing. Those giant 5-part series are few, but important investigations don't have to be giant stories. My ProPublica colleagues right now who are furiously editing a story that I'm not there to work with them on, so they're working and I'm not. Charlie Ornstein and Tracy Weber revealed horrific problems at LA County's King Drew Hospital. They did 80 on-the-beat stories before they ever did any kind of big enterprise in their project. Investigative reporting can come in lots of forms. When I left a newspaper to join something called ProPublica, actually ProPublica, whatever it was, nobody even knew how to pronounce it when I went there. And my colleagues thought I was crazy and that the organization was doomed to fail. So far we've done pretty well. We won Pulitzers our first 2 years. We're in trouble because we didn't last year. But we also work our butts off. We work really hard to do the stories we do. We partnered with hundreds of news organizations around the country, radio, TV, magazines, newspapers, and we occasionally have international journalists come be fellows in our office. And last year we had a young Serbian reporter. He had dreadlocks like way down to here. I think most of the reporters in our newsroom didn't know why I was there or what he was doing. But he was doing some amazing work about corruption in the Balkans. And I wasn't there for his last day, but he left me a note on my desk saying that there was a sealed envelope that he had put in my drawer, and that if I didn't hear back from him, to please send it to his colleague because he didn't make it back out of Serbia. And that kind of put things in perspective for me. I whine about like I can't get a piece of software, and they're risking their lives. So that reminds me just how important what we're doing all over the world is. So in light of that, I thought of some things that I think might help investigative reporting. Just interviewing everybody and their thoughts. So as Susan mentioned, passion, which definitely our young Serbian friend had. No one can work this hard and not want to do it. So all you students, you want to work really hard, right? You really want to do this, right? Good, okay. Call me in 3 years. For me, this has been a really hard week. I'm not at a daily news organization, so I didn't have to do a lot of the daily stuff. But I have to want to do this to keep working on it. Another thing we need to do is invest in research and development. We work in an industry that has never spent money on research for what we actually make. And I'm not talking about advertising research. We need to invest in researching better tools for gathering and disseminating news. That's one thing we do a little bit at ProPublica, and there's been, in the industry, some great tools come out recently. There's something called Document Cloud, which is a free tool for managing documents for journalists. If you haven't seen it, see me later in the corner, I'll give you a little demo. There's other tools like something called Timeline Setter, which helps you build timelines. Anyway, there's some good tools coming out, but I think we just need to do more of that. Training. If you're in management, get training for your reporters and editors. If you're a reporter or editor, get training, even if you have to do it on your own. A lot of the training I did early on, I went to IRE conferences and training when I was a young journalist, and I offered to work the front desk so that I could also go to the conference. So there's ways to kind of get that in there. Technology is a moving target. Embrace it. It is there. We really need to keep up with it so we can do better reporting. There's amazing tools out there that I find out about every day from folks in our newsroom. And cross-training is really important, just to understand other beats and other topics. This week's events are really kind of bring that home. We had a bombing at a sports event, so most people there covering were sports reporters. 9/11 happened during Fashion Week in New York, so most of the reporters there were actually fashion reporters, and many did a great job covering 9/11. Okay, I'm going to put a little plug here for something I do, so indulge me just a minute. It is 2013. We need to be able to work with data. How many of you can use a spreadsheet? Yay, okay, that's way better than in our newsroom. Government keeps its information in computer, and we need to be able to use that information. So if you don't, we'll be doing an Excel training class in the corner after dinner. Collaborate. We can't afford to do 100 different versions of the same story. This week is a little different in that we're all trying to get information about what's going on. But in today's environment, especially when it comes to investigations or things that take resources, working together can help us all. A few years ago, the Houston Chronicle teamed up with the Texas Tribune in its coverage of abuses of treatment centers for developmentally disabled. And this kind of working together thing is not new. This is what actually started IRE and other journalism organizations. In 1976, a group of reporters and editors led by the legendary Bob Green, which I saw once teach a bunch of Bosnians how to sing The Bear Went Over the Mountain, came together to finish the work of Don Bowles, who was killed in a car bomb. It resulted in a 23-part series, that would not happen today, about organized crime in Arizona and mafia influence and the weak justice system there. More recently, there was a similar gathering in Oakland after the death of Chauncey Bailey. And this is how the project's website described its work, which I really like how they put this. If anyone thought Oakland Post editor Chauncey Bailey's work would die when he was gunned down on August 2nd, 2007, they were terribly wrong. Within weeks, about 36 reporters, editors, and other volunteers gathered in Oakland to finish his work. Our goal is to hammer home this point. You can't kill a story by killing a journalist. Unlike the Arizona project, which is the Don Bowles project, we aren't mainly newspaper people who've come from all over the country. Instead, we're a collaboration of local journalists across media, from daily and weekly newspapers, websites, radio, television, journalism associations, and universities. In a time of staff rejections across all media, collaborations for a story of this magnitude makes sense. It also shows the unity and resolve that drives our response to this outrageous crime. In addition to playing well with others, there's another childhood thing we need to remember: to share. That's one thing we try to do a lot at ProPublica. When we do a project with significant data, we make all that data available online to other reporters so that they can do stories. We can't possibly do all the stories that are in some of these big national data sets. So for us, it's really cool to see what comes out of those. A couple years ago, we had a tool so that people could search whether their doctor got payments from a pharmaceutical company called Dollars for Doctors. And in 2013, more than 140 news organizations, including my former employer, the Dallas Morning News, did great stories from that data. And that app itself received 4.5 million page views in 2013. So listen to other disciplines. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Accountants, chemists, economists all have great tools for looking at data, for doing research, and we can tap into that without having to reinvent the wheel. Find gurus, especially you younger folks, even in the most unexpected places. Some of those that I thought were the grumpiest, grisliest guys in the newsroom turned out to be those I respected the most and learned so much from. I'm so happy that I knew them. In turn, be generous with others. Share what you know with up-and-coming journalists, even if they seem like snotty know-it-alls. I was a snotty know-it-all. I know how to do the computer stuff. They will appreciate it later, and journalism will be better for it. Try new things. Cover something new, freelance for another section of your paper, learn some new technology skills. Remain teachable. A former colleague of mine signed up for a mentorship program I coordinate. I thought it was odd because he's a very long time experienced reporter, but he started a new job where he needed some web skills, and so he asked to be matched up with one of the younger web designers so that he could learn that. And I thought that was great. I hope I can be that way. You know, he realized what he didn't know and, you know, was willing to be teachable. I hope that I never get to a point where I know everything. Well, I clearly don't know. That's when we all stop growing. So I know it's been a long week. You all probably want another drink. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's really been an honor. Thanks.